A lot of people don't understand or know that England has a very ghetto and rough side to it. I think when they look at the UK or think of the United Kingdom as a whole, they think of people that are posh, people that drink tea all day. Well, obviously, this is true if you're an aristocrat, if you're part of the royal family, if you're part of the elites. But for everybody else, it's you're either working class or you're either in the hood slanging and doing the damn thing. Now, most boxing observers know that Dylan Whyte and Anthony Joshua came from a life of destitution. Now, when you think of Anthony Joshua, what comes to mind? Well, it depends what year you're talking about. For example, in 2015, Anthony Joshua was a rising star and a former Olympic gold medalist, clean cut, marketable athlete. Doesn't strike controversy, nor does he argue with those that are below him, the perfect media market public relations machine that one could resemble the motto of the English royal family: never complain and never explain. Now, Joshua seems above it all in terms of foolish online banter or going back and forth with harsh talking fighters such as Dylan Whyte or Baby Miller. Now, fast forward to 2023. Dylan Whyte and Anthony Joshua are now 1-1 with each other in both pro and amateur matches. Now, Joshua is no longer the unified champion of the world, and Dylan Whyte remained in the same position he was prior to the Tyson Fury fight, back again with just a few more fights to reach another world championship shot by, let's say, one of the sanctioning bodies. WBC obviously gave him a shot from the Tyson Fury fight. And speaking of Tyson Fury, we all know how Joshua became the unified champion. It is as if the British sports and media elites had this plan to somehow crown a more presentable champion, with the case of 2015 Tyson Fury having mental health crisis issues mixed with the dangers of getting canceled. I suggest you guys look up 2015 Tyson Fury controversy for further context and information on this matter. Now, everything that is inclusive, multicultural, and diverse, the modern ethos of the new Great Britain would be ashamed of someone like Tyson Fury. Now, it is no wonder Tyson Fury mentions his support for Donald Trump. You've seen how the country is kind of going left in that matter, right? Within that 2015 timeframe, Tyson Fury was stripped, and Anthony Joshua picked up those belts with consecutive vacant title fights against current top contenders of his current championship collection phase that he was going through at the time. Now, after his first professional rematch with Dylan Whyte, in which they fought for an international Commonwealth British title, and by the way, which catapulted Joshua into world levels of the likes of Charles Martin, Brazil, Molina, Vladimir Klitschko, Takam, then wins from the WBO title against Parker, beats Povetkin, then loses to Ruiz by KO, and then rematches to get a decision. Then defends against Pulev, then loses twice to Usyk back to back. And this is where we are before Usyk and the Ruiz fights, former amateur boxer that I talked to online, Michael Kelly, who has boxed with AJ in his earlier days, describes that era of boxing within the mid 2010s or 16s or whatnot was something of like the Joshua Mania, in reference to Hulk Hogan's prime days of being the ultimate hero to kids in the 1980s. Well, a good comparison, and let's analyze that within the chronological order of Hulk Hogan's fictional storied wrestling career. He was a 1980s American hero, and then the Attitude Era of the 90s required him to become Hollywood Hulk Hogan, a biker gang leader of the NWO faction. And there was a 90s gangster rap vibe about the NWO, or D-Generation X of the WWE. This is where Anthony Joshua is currently at. And I think the contrasting dynamics of his influence and position now in comparison to, let's say, 2015 is rather humbling and remarkable at the same time if you really think about it. Okay, so for example, right, this fight is going to be held in the O2 Arena. Now, that's not a bad gig. The UFC has been in the O2 Arena several times and twice in 1 year in some instances. Drake performs in the O2 Arena, but we're talking about Anthony Joshua headlining stadiums in 2017. Now, this man will always have a better life than most people around the world, but still, it's worth noting the difference in the dropping of the stardom now as opposed to the mega celebrity status in the mid 2010s and his mediocre notoriety starting in the 2020s of when he started to lose to Ruiz and then winning a lackluster decision after that in the same year of 2019. Now, this is the phase of AJ's life where it's honestly quite refreshing and very revealing. I'm going to tell you why. AJ, at his stage right now, okay, is where he can be honest. And this is where life can be quite refreshing and very revealing. And where he can be honest about being hood, whereas in his peak fame, he had to hide a certain elements of his rough side. Now, for those that are rap fans, you can say AJ doesn't have to be the Will Smith of boxing anymore. If you guys remember in the 90s, Will Smith was often clowned by gangster rappers as a guy that really didn't curse at all, okay? Or did anything raunchy or anything like that that the other guys were doing. Okay, now, rather, AJ can play the Tupac role in his last Death Row record days. From a boxing and sporting point of view, now this is actually quite refreshing for AJ. Do you want to know why? Well, ask McGregor. Okay, because the guy couldn't get a fight during a pandemic. It takes a high volume of work to put together an event for a high-profile name in any combat sports setting. The advertisements, the staff that comes with the advertisements, the TV deals and the negotiations that come with that. Sure, we know that ESPN and BT Sport, now known as TNT Sports, have a stake in the UFC and boxing, but what about German TV? What about Polish TV? What about Ukrainian TV that was involved in the Usyk fight? All these markets that the UFC infiltrates on the low and behind the scenes of bringing these boxing and MMA products to countries we may not even know about or may not even know that they have some sort of channel to facilitate boxing or any combat sports event, which makes the high-profile athlete output more work in the media and its presentation. Okay, and McGregor has cited this when he was going to rematch Nate Diaz the second time around, in which they were going to hold that fight in UFC 200, but then later moved it down to months in August of 2016 to UFC 202. Okay, so this is also why Ronda Rousey decided to make a media blackout during her return in the Amanda Nunes fight. Now, prior to that, she suffered a loss equal to Mike Tyson versus Buster Douglas when she got head kicked by none other than Holly Holmes, who's also a former boxing champion moving into MMA. Now, the fact that Rousey was crowned an unstoppable force and Rousey enabled her own hype gave her a faster downfall than, let's say, a normal prospect taking an early loss in her career. Now, every fight Rousey had, it was amplified to another level, meaning that all the media attention that she had, the sponsorships, the magazine covers, on top of the fact that she lived in Los Angeles, which, by the way, made her reach even bigger considering that all the sports agencies were involved in that region, including Endeavor, which is, by the way, owned by the UFC now, and they were Ronda Rousey's management group before before the UFC was even bought by Endeavor, that particular company. So, yes, her reach is bigger because of that. And now, in Anthony Joshua's case, he's in that same position. But what is unique about him is now he can go back to just being another Joe Joyce or a Daniel Dubois of some sort. Now, these guys can headline an arena, but they can't headline a stadium. Now, of course, Anthony Joshua is in a different trajectory of his career. He's a former world champion, whereas these guys have yet to taste that type of gold. At least, not in the world levels, nonetheless. But now, these guys, these guys can't headline an arena. They can headline an arena, but not a stadium. Now, Joshua headlining a stadium with a no-name opponent today. Remember when he was able to headline a stadium show without really anybody, Carlos Takam, and then people just showed up in Wales and Cardiff in that big stadium they have there just to see this guy fight somebody that they don't know. Well, look, Kenny headline fights in a stadium today with a no name? And the answer is clearly no. The Usyk fight took a toll on his brand because his brand was focused on being a champion. Now that Anthony Joshua isn't a champion, he can go back to just being AJ, who tried to scare the lights out of those college uni kids who tried to shout nonsense at him from the balcony, only for AJ to go and confront them and tell them, I'm not all about that media hype, and I think I know what AJ means by saying this to these college students when he threatened him. He's saying to these prank-driven college kids that the AJ you see in the commercials is not what you will get when you cross me in the streets. Okay, it's the AJ from Watford, England, home of stabbings and gang violence, etc. This is the guy that you're messing with. Now, training with Derek James also helps with building this attitude. You see James confronting Crawford at the presser with no fear when Crawford tried to get in his face. AJ needs to be around guys like this. Bring the old AJ out of him. It's shocking how people in England fell for the muscles and the magazine covers of AJ. And then also the other side of it, there's people out there that basically slag him off for selling drugs. And of course, in the United States, it's kind of hard for people in the social settings of the urban community to slag off somebody who's selling drugs because oftentimes they're doing it out of necessity. But in the argument of English conservatives, the way that they look at it is, well, there's enough social welfare system in that country for you to not have to sell drugs. Now, here's the thing. It's all relative, right? Being poor in a third world country is no different than being poor in a first world country. Yes, there is a massive difference in luxury between being poor in the projects or council estates as opposed to the barrios or the ghettos of the world or the destitute places around the world where it's literally dirt poor, where they have nothing but dirt. Yes, I understand this, but the fact of the matter is, it's all relative. And to AJ's case, this was something that he felt he had to do because him and his family were not in the right economic settings. Now, who was AJ before boxing? Well, some reports say he used to sell weed, and depending on who you ask, this may seem like a minor offense for some, a major infraction for some people to society. Now, some will hold that view. Some will hold the view that it isn't like he was selling cocaine, but some will also say he was just trying to provide a means of income in a desperation from a destitute lifestyle that he was living, depending on how you want to determine or rank what destitution or lack of resources is and to whose relative interpretation that may be. Now, if there's one thing I can point out about AJ's current career path in the current space is that he can play up this role of being that street guy. Okay, I can only imagine when he lost a significant amount of sponsorships as a result of the losses that he's had to Usyk, or it was Ruiz in the first time. Now let's look at the pay-per-view numbers that AJ has, right, in terms of his entire career, and this is going to show you why the man makes the type of money that he makes. So going back to the Dylan Whyte fight, which by the way was his first pay-per-view in 2015, 700,000 buys against Martin, 1.3 million against Brazil, just half a million against Molina, a little more than that. I remember that Dylan Whyte and Chisora were the co-main event of that card, so having a $700,000 buy had something to do with that. 764,000 buys he had for that one. Klitschko, 1.6 million. Takam, he comes back, gets 1 million buys, and by the way, that's literally with a nobody, a no-namer, right? Because Takam, yes, he's known to the hardcore fans of boxing, but not so much to the outside world of that. Okay, Parker, 1.8 million. Okay, so he had a whole different region of people watching him there, obviously in the South Pacific region of the world. Povetkin, 1.2 million. Ruiz, the first time, only 500,000, in which he lost. The second time, 1.5 million in a rematch. 800,000 for the Pulev fight, and 1.2 million each for both Usyk fights. 1.2 million and the rematch as well. So that totals up to 14 million pay-per-view buys, and then the views that he has in the international TV scenes is up to 22 million viewership, 22 million views in terms of his international reach in Ukraine, Poland, the United States, Ukraine and Germany, and all these other markets that Anthony Joshua was involved in. Now, if there's one thing that I can say, the bottom line about this whole thing is that the type of fans that AJ attracts are those who don't really follow boxing. Now, what do I mean by that? As expensive as UFC tickets are, in which people were complaining about in UFC London, okay, many of my London colleagues and fellow martial arts enthusiasts in that part of the world tell me on the ground that only a few people really buy UFC tickets, and the rest of them are hipsters trying to be seen, or people that are just trying to do the trendy thing, or rich people that can have expenditures that they can spend just to go out on the weekends just to say, yeah, I was at a UFC fight or this and that. I don't really know much about it, because obviously if you're a UFC or an MMA fan in the UK, man, you're going to have to stay up late to watch these fights. So for you to be a fan, you have to be extra dedicated in being an observer of that sport. So again, not genuine fans, and I agree with the assessment for this boxing side also, with the type of fans that AJ has attracted over the years. Not real boxing or fight fans. Very few people out there are hardcores. Now this time AJ can be a hardcore fighter for fight fans in that sense, and a hardcore man in another way of playing up the gangster role. He can rebrand his image into this Hollywood Hogan brand coming from the Hulkamania, AJ Mania days, and into this bad guy heel role that now they're trying to market this entire fight with him and Dylan Whyte as history of violence. Well, this is what the other boxing and MMA channels are not seeing. Okay, I see a man who's from London with a story to tell, a story in which he never really had a chance to tell because of the PR team around him. You look at Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing, the way that they market Katie Taylor, right? A very clean cut type of person. This is Eddie Hearn's image, because even though Eddie likes all the banter, all the entertainment,